Three bullies cornered a black woman in dark garage, didn't know she trained Delta Force for 12 years. Why did the three aggressors believe the woman standing alone would be unable to defend herself? What would they do after discovering the experience she had kept hidden? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Afterglow Reckoning Tales, where reckless choices, concealed strength, and unexpected consequences unfold in an instant. Before today's story begins, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another suspenseful episode. Thank you for watching, commenting, sharing, and continuing to support our channel. Every viewer helps Afterglow Reckoning Tales grow stronger and reach audiences across the world. Let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there right now. Your presence means more to us than you know. Now, get comfortable, remain alert, and let us step into the intense opening moments of today's story. You have 5 seconds to let go of my arm. Maya Carter said it so quietly that the three men standing around her almost laughed. Almost. Because there was something in her voice that didn't sound like fear. It didn't sound like a woman trapped in a dark parking garage with three strangers blocking every exit. It sounded like a warning. The underground garage beneath the old downtown building was nearly empty. The flickering lights above cast long shadows across the concrete floor, and every sound seemed amplified, the echo of footsteps, the hum of distant machinery, the slow drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Maya stood beside her car, one hand holding her bag, the other hanging calmly at her side. She looked like anyone else leaving work late. A black woman in her late 30s. Simple jacket. Plain sneakers. No bodyguard. No fear. That was the first mistake they made. Jake Reynolds leaned closer, still gripping her wrist with a careless smile. 32 years old, confident because he had never been challenged by someone he thought was weaker. Behind him stood Tyler Brooks and Ryan Mitchell. 3 men. 1 woman. That was the picture they saw. And they believed they already knew how the story would end. You hear that? Ryan said, raising his phone slightly as the camera started recording. She's giving us a countdown. Tyler laughed. She actually thinks she's in control. The sound bounced against the concrete walls. But Maya didn't move. She didn't pull away. She didn't scream for help. She simply looked at Jake's hand around her arm. Then she looked at his face. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Jake's smile faded slightly. Not because he was scared. Not yet. But because he noticed something strange. Maya wasn't looking at him like someone searching for a way out. She was looking at him like someone calculating one. For 12 years, Maya Carter had learned how to read situations before they became dangerous. Distance. Angles. Movement. Intent. Most people reacted after something happened. She survived by seeing what came before. But these men didn't know that. They only saw what they wanted to see. A woman alone. A woman they assumed wouldn't fight back. A woman they believed they could embarrass because the world had taught them certain people were easier targets. Jake tightened his grip. Or what? He whispered. The garage went silent. Maya looked at him for one more second. Then she said, or you're going to spend the rest of your night wondering why you ignored the warning. That was when Ryan laughed louder. Man, record this. She thinks she's some kind of action hero. The phone camera stayed pointed at Maya. The 3 men wanted a reaction. Anger. Panic. Tears. Anything they could turn into entertainment. But Maya gave them nothing. Because they didn't understand something important. Silence was not surrender. Sometimes silence was preparation. And as she stood beneath the cold garage lights, surrounded by people who believed they had the advantage, Maya remembered every moment that brought her here. Every obstacle. Every person who underestimated her. Every time someone looked at her and decided they already knew her story. They never asked what she had survived. They never asked what she had learned. They never asked why she could stand alone in a dark garage with 3 aggressive men and still look completely calm. Because if they had known the truth, they would have walked away before they ever touched her. Jake released a small laugh and stepped closer. You really don't understand your situation, do you? Maya slowly looked past him toward the empty garage exit. Then back at him. No, she said. You don't understand yours. And in that moment, none of them realized the biggest mistake they had already made. They thought they had cornered Maya Carter. But they didn't know. Maya had spent 12 years learning what to do when someone thought they had trapped her. The first thing Maya Carter noticed was not the 3 men surrounding her. It was the exit. The dimly lit garage stretched behind Jake Reynolds and his friends, but Maya's eyes had already mapped every detail before they even realized she was paying attention. 2 security cameras above the parking lanes. 1 emergency door 20 feet to her left. A narrow gap between a concrete pillar and a parked SUV. 3 people. 1 clear path. That was how Maya saw the world. Not through panic. Through awareness. But Jake Reynolds didn't see any of that. He saw a woman standing alone in a dark garage after midnight. He saw someone he believed had no power. And that was enough for him. You're still standing here? Jake laughed, releasing her wrist only to step closer. Most people would be begging by now. Maya slowly adjusted her jacket sleeve where his fingers had been. She didn't answer. That bothered him more than anger would have. Because people who were afraid usually tried to explain themselves. They apologized. They negotiated. They asked for mercy. Maya did none of those things. Ryan Mitchell lowered his phone slightly, confused. Why isn't she saying anything? Tyler Brooks shrugged. Maybe she finally realized she picked the wrong night to act tough. The 3 men laughed together. The sound filled the empty garage. But Maya remained still. She had spent years learning something most people never understood. Noise often came from insecurity. The loudest person in the room was rarely the most dangerous. Jake walked around her slowly, studying her like she was a problem he had already solved. You know what your problem is, he said. Maya looked at him. You think people are going to help you? He pointed toward the empty garage. Nobody's coming. For a moment, something changed in Maya's expression. Not fear. Not anger. Something closer to disappointment. Because she had heard those words before. Different place. Different person. Same belief. People always assumed isolation meant weakness. They never understood that some people became stronger because they had survived being alone. Years earlier, Maya Carter had walked into rooms where nobody expected her to succeed. She remembered the first time someone looked at her uniform and questioned whether she belonged. The first time someone saw a black woman entering a world built on tradition and decided she was out of place. The first time she realized she would have to work twice as hard just to be judged fairly. But Maya never chased approval. She built discipline. She built patience. She built control. And eventually, she built a reputation that few people knew about. Because the most capable people rarely announce what they can do. They simply wait. Back in the garage, Jake leaned closer. You're not listening. Maya tilted her head slightly. No, she said calmly. I'm listening. A small smile appeared on Jake's face. Then you understand you're in trouble. Maya looked past him again. The cameras. The exits. The distance between each person. Every movement. Every possibility. Then she looked back. No, her voice remained quiet. You're confusing control with intimidation. The smile disappeared from Jake's face. Tyler stepped forward. You really think you're better than us? Maya looked at him. I think you're making decisions you won't be proud of tomorrow. Ryan laughed from behind the phone. Man, this is incredible. She's giving a speech. But the camera captured something Ryan didn't understand. Maya's hands were relaxed. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes were focused. She wasn't preparing to fight. She was preparing for whatever came next. That was the difference. A scared person reacts. A trained person decides. Jake noticed the silence around her and grew irritated. People like him depended on fear. Fear made people smaller. Fear made people easier to control. But Maya wasn't shrinking. She was standing exactly where she had always stood. Calm. Centered. Ready. You know, Jake said, I expected you to cry by now. Maya looked at him for a long second. Then she answered, that's because you've never met someone who doesn't need your permission to be strong. The words landed harder than she intended. Not because they were loud. Because they were true. The garage became quiet again. For the first time that night, Jake Reynolds felt something he hadn't felt before. Uncertainty. He didn't know why. He didn't know what he was missing. But somewhere deep inside, a warning bell had started ringing. Because Maya Carter wasn't acting like someone trapped in a garage. She was acting like someone who had been in worse places, and walked out every single time. And the three men standing around her were about to learn the same lesson others had learned before them. Never mistake a quiet person for a powerless one. The three men still believed they were in control. That was the dangerous thing about confidence built on ignorance. Jake Reynolds stood in front of Maya Carter, watching her with growing frustration. He had expected fear. He had expected hesitation. He had expected the same reaction he had seen from people before, a quick apology, a nervous voice, a desperate attempt to escape. But Maya gave him nothing. And that made him uncomfortable. Because people like Jake understood anger. They understood panic. They understood someone begging them to stop. What they did not understand was calm. What are you waiting for? Tyler Brooks asked with a mocking smile. You've been standing there like you're not even scared. Maya looked at him. I'm not. The answer was simple. No drama. No performance. Just the truth. Ryan Mitchell lowered his phone for a moment. For the first time that night, the excitement on his face disappeared. You're seriously not afraid? Maya looked at the camera pointed toward her. Then she looked back at Ryan. Fear is useful. The three men exchanged confused looks. Maya continued. But only when you control it. Those words hung in the air. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Because they were looking at Maya Carter and seeing only the person standing in front of them. They didn't see the years behind her. They didn't see the moments when she had to prove herself in places where nobody expected her to belong. They didn't see the early mornings, the impossible standards, the endless pressure. They didn't see a young woman walking into rooms where people had already decided what she could and couldn't become. A black woman entering a world where every mistake would be remembered. Every success would be questioned. Every achievement would need to be earned twice. But Maya never let other people's expectations become her limits. She learned discipline. She learned patience. She learned that the strongest person wasn't always the person making the most noise. Sometimes, it was the person who could stand in the middle of chaos and remain completely still. Back in the garage, Jake stepped closer. You keep acting like you're different. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. I am. Jake laughed. That's your problem. No, Maya replied. That's your mistake. The answer irritated him. Jake had spent years intimidating people because he understood one thing: most people surrender before they are ever truly defeated. A harsh word. A threatening posture. A louder voice. That was usually enough. But Maya wasn't responding to the performance. She was watching the person behind it. And what she saw was not strength. It was insecurity hiding behind aggression. Tyler moved around to her side. "You know, you should really be more careful who you talk to." Maya glanced at him. A small smile appeared. Not because she was amused. Because she already knew something they didn't. They had confused restraint with inability. And that was a mistake people often made when they met someone who had spent years mastering themselves. Ryan started recording again. "This is going to be everywhere tomorrow." Maya looked directly into the camera. For a brief second, Ryan thought he had finally gotten the reaction he wanted. But instead of embarrassment, he saw confidence. "You should be careful what you record," she said. Ryan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means people always think they're collecting evidence against someone else." She paused. "Sometimes they're just documenting their own choices." The words made Ryan uncomfortable. Because suddenly the video he thought would humiliate her didn't feel so powerful anymore. Jake noticed the change. He stepped forward, trying to take back control. "You think because you're calm, you're winning?" Maya looked at him. "No," she glanced around the garage. "I think you lost the moment you decided I was someone you could disrespect." For a moment, nobody spoke. The lights above them flickered. The garage became silent. And somewhere beneath Maya's calm expression was a history none of them knew. A history built through pressure. Through sacrifice. Through moments where walking away was not an option. Because Maya Carter had not spent 12 years learning how to fight. She had spent 12 years learning something far more important. When to fight. When not to. And when someone crossed the line. How to make sure they understood exactly what they had done. The three men still thought they were facing an ordinary woman in a dark garage. They had no idea they were standing in front of someone who had spent years preparing for situations exactly like this. And soon, they were going to discover why Maya Carter was never the person they should have chosen. The moment everything changed was not when Maya Carter fought back. It was when they crossed the line. Because until that moment, Maya had been giving them a choice. A chance to stop. A chance to walk away. A chance to realize that the person standing in front of them was not someone they could intimidate. But people who believe they have power often make the same mistake. They think patience means weakness. They think silence means surrender. And they keep pushing until there is nothing left to protect them from the consequences. The garage became colder as the four figures stood frozen beneath the flickering lights. Jake Reynolds stared at Maya, frustrated that his usual tactics were failing. He was used to controlling situations. A louder voice. A threatening step forward. A confident smile. That was usually enough. But Maya wasn't reacting the way he expected. And when someone refuses to play the role you assigned them, it creates uncertainty. "You really think you're above us?" Jake asked. Maya didn't answer immediately. She looked at him carefully. Not because she was afraid. Because she was deciding. There was always a moment. A moment where a situation could still go in two different directions. A moment where people could choose restraint over regret. Maya had seen that moment many times before. During training. During missions. During situations where one wrong decision could change everything. She always believed in giving people that moment. But Jake didn't understand what he was being given. He stepped closer. "You should learn when to stop talking." Ryan lifted his phone higher, excited. "This is perfect." He looked at the screen. A woman acting tough in a parking garage. He smiled. People are going to love this. Maya looked at the phone. Then she looked back at Ryan. The irony was almost impossible to miss. He thought he was creating a moment of humiliation. But he was actually creating evidence. Evidence of every word. Every threat. Every choice. Then Tyler moved. Fast. Too fast. He reached toward Maya's bag and grabbed the strap. It was a small action. Something they probably believed didn't matter. But Maya's expression changed. Only slightly. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But those trained to recognize danger would have. The calm was still there. The patience was still there. But something else appeared. A boundary had been crossed. Let go, Maya said. Tyler laughed. What are you going to do? The question echoed through the garage. And for the first time that night, Maya stopped explaining. She simply looked at him. Because some people only understand consequences after they ignore every warning. Jake stepped beside Tyler, enjoying the moment. The three men believed they had finally broken through. They thought they had pushed her into a corner. They thought they had removed every option. But they made one mistake. They assumed being surrounded meant being powerless. Maya had learned the opposite. Sometimes being surrounded only shows you exactly where everyone is standing. Her eyes moved. Jake. Tyler. Ryan. 3 people. 3 positions. 3 mistakes. The same way she had always analyzed every difficult situation. No emotion. No panic. Just information. For a brief second, the garage disappeared. And Maya remembered another place. A different time. A younger version of herself standing in a training facility surrounded by people who doubted her. People who wondered if she belonged. People who believed certain challenges were meant for someone else. But Maya remembered what she learned there. The body follows the mind. Panic creates mistakes. Control creates options. And discipline creates survival. Back in the garage, Jake noticed the change. What? He asked. Maya looked at him. Nothing. Then she calmly removed her hand from the strap Tyler was holding. That simple movement confused them. Because they expected struggle. They expected fear. They expected her to fight for control. Instead, Maya moved like someone who already had it. You had your warning, she said. Jake smiled. Or what? The same question. The same arrogance. The same mistake. Maya took one slow breath. And the entire atmosphere changed. Because the woman they thought they had trapped was no longer waiting. She was ready. They still didn't know who Maya Carter really was. They still didn't know about the years she spent preparing for moments exactly like this. They still believed they were 3 men standing over one woman. But the truth was much different. They were 3 men standing in front of someone who had spent 12 years learning how to survive when the odds were against her. And in a few seconds, they were going to understand the difference between someone who looks dangerous, and someone who actually is. The mistake was thinking Maya Carter needed permission to defend herself. For several minutes, she had stood there. Silent. Patient. Giving 3 men every opportunity to walk away from a decision they were making without understanding the consequences. But they kept pushing. And finally, they crossed the line. Tyler Brooks still held onto the strap of Maya's bag, his confidence growing because nothing had happened yet. That was the illusion. People often mistake restraint for weakness. They see someone refusing to react and assume that person has no ability to respond. But Maya Carter had spent years learning something different. The most dangerous person in any situation was not always the one who moved first. Sometimes it was the one who waited. The one who watched. The one who already knew exactly what they were capable of. Last chance, Maya said quietly. Tyler smiled. Or what? For a second, the entire garage became still. The flickering lights. The distant sound of a car passing above. The faint echo of their voices against the concrete walls. Everything slowed. And then Tyler made the decision he would remember for the rest of his life. He pulled harder. Maya moved. Not with anger. Not with panic. With precision. A sudden shift. A controlled movement. The confidence disappeared from Tyler's face before he even understood what happened. 1 second, he thought he was holding her back. The next, he was struggling to understand how the situation had completely changed. Jake froze. Ryan lowered his phone slightly. Because they didn't see what they expected to see. They expected a fight. They expected chaos. Instead, they saw control. Maya didn't move like someone trying to survive. She moved like someone who already knew the outcome. Tyler stepped backward, confused and embarrassed. What did you just do? Maya looked at him calmly. I gave you a chance. Jake's expression changed. The confidence was gone. Only for a moment. But Maya noticed. Because she noticed everything. That was what years of training created. Not just strength. Awareness. The ability to recognize a threat before it became one. The ability to remain calm when everyone else lost control. And that skill was not built overnight. It came from years of being tested. Years of being questioned. Years of proving herself in places where people expected her to fail. Maya remembered the first day she entered elite training. The looks. The doubts. The silent judgment. Some people didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Their expressions said enough. They wondered if she belonged. They wondered if someone like her could handle the pressure. But Maya never focused on proving them wrong. She focused on becoming better. Every difficult day. Every impossible challenge. Every moment where quitting would have been easier. She built herself through discipline. Not because she wanted attention. Because she understood something important. Strength that needs to be announced is usually not strength. Real strength stays quiet. Back in the garage, Jake stepped forward again. But this time, there was hesitation in his eyes. You think that little trick changes anything? Maya looked at him. It changes everything. Ryan looked between them. His phone was still recording. But now he wasn't smiling. Because the video had become something completely different. It was no longer a story about 3 men humiliating a woman. It was becoming evidence of 3 men making the worst mistake of their lives. Jake noticed Ryan's expression. Keep recording. Ryan didn't answer. For the first time, he wasn't sure who the camera was helping. Maya slowly stepped away from Tyler. She didn't chase him. She didn't threaten him. She didn't need to. That was what confused them the most. She had the ability to embarrass them. To hurt them. To make them feel the same fear they had tried to create. But she chose control. Because Maya knew the difference between power and revenge. Anyone could lose control. Anyone could react. But true discipline was knowing you had power, and choosing exactly how to use it. Jake stared at her. What are you? The question came out differently this time. Not with arrogance. With uncertainty. Maya looked at the 3 men standing in front of her. Then she answered, someone you should have respected before you tried to intimidate. The garage fell silent. And for the first time that night, they realized something terrifying. They were not dealing with someone who had been lucky. They were dealing with someone who had been prepared. Someone who had spent 12 years mastering situations where the odds were against her. Someone who had learned how to survive when surrounded. The only thing they didn't know yet was who had trained her. And when they discovered the truth behind Maya Carter's past, they would finally understand why they had never been in control. The question came from the one person who had been the loudest all night. "What are you?" Jake Reynolds said it quietly this time. Not with confidence. Not with arrogance. With uncertainty. Because something had changed. A few minutes earlier, he had looked at Maya Carter like she was just another person he could intimidate. Someone alone. Someone vulnerable. Someone who would eventually break under pressure. But now he was looking at her differently. Because people who rely on fear are always confused when fear doesn't work. Maya stood beneath the flickering garage lights, completely calm. 3 men were still standing in front of her. But the balance had shifted. Not because she was stronger than them. Not because she wanted revenge. Because she understood something they didn't. Real power is not about making people afraid of you. It is about never needing their fear in the first place. Ryan Mitchell slowly lowered his phone. The excitement was gone from his face. The video he thought would embarrass Maya had become something else. A record. A witness. A reminder of every decision they had made. Every threat. Every word. Every moment when they could have stopped. Jake noticed. "What are you doing?" Ryan looked at him. "I'm just recording." But even he didn't believe himself anymore. Because the story was no longer 3 men cornering a woman. The story had changed. And everyone watching that video later would see the same thing. A group of people who thought they had power, standing in front of someone who had already mastered herself. Maya looked at the 3 men. "You still have time to leave." Jake almost laughed. Almost. Because even now, part of him refused to accept what was happening. "You think this is over because you got lucky?" Maya's expression didn't change. Luck had nothing to do with it. Those words carried something different. Experience. Not the kind someone gains from reading books or watching videos. The kind earned through years of pressure. Years of situations where mistakes had consequences. Years where hesitation could cost more than pride. And slowly, the truth behind Maya Carter began to surface. Not all at once. Just enough for them to realize they had completely misunderstood her. A security door at the far end of the garage suddenly opened. An older man wearing a security uniform stepped inside. He had heard the voices from the hallway. At first, he thought it was another argument. Another late-night incident that needed to be handled. Then he saw Maya. And he stopped. His expression changed instantly. "Wait," everyone looked toward him. The security guard stared at Maya like he was trying to confirm what his eyes were seeing. "Maya Carter?" For the first time that night, Maya's calm expression softened slightly. "Marcus." The guard walked closer. "You're here." The 3 men looked confused. Jake frowned. "You know her?" Marcus looked at Jake. Then at Tyler. Then at Ryan's phone. And suddenly, his expression became serious. "You have no idea who you just approached." The words created a silence that felt heavier than anything before. Because Jake had spent the entire night believing Maya was the person with the disadvantage. But now another person had entered the room. And instead of asking what happened to her, he was asking what happened to them. Marcus looked back at Maya. "I haven't seen you since," he stopped. Because some stories don't need to be explained immediately. Some stories carry weight before anyone knows the details. Maya Carter had spent years keeping her past private. Not because she was ashamed. Because she understood that the people who truly have ability rarely need to advertise it. But tonight, these men had forced that past into the present. Jake stepped forward. "Who is she?" Marcus looked at him. Then answered with a calmness that made Jake uncomfortable. "She's someone you should have walked away from." Tyler exchanged a nervous glance with Ryan. The confidence they had walked into the garage with was disappearing. Piece by piece. Because they were finally realizing something. Maya wasn't calm because she was helpless. She was calm because she knew exactly what she was capable of. Marcus looked at Maya. "Do they know?" Maya shook her head. "No." A small silence followed. Then Marcus nodded. "Maybe they should." The words hung in the air. And for the first time that night, Jake Reynolds felt something he had avoided from the beginning. Not fear. Understanding. He had judged Maya by what he saw. A woman alone. A woman in a dark garage. A woman he believed he could overpower. But he never asked the question that mattered. What kind of person could stand there surrounded by 3 aggressive men, and remain completely unshaken? The answer was finally coming. And when Jake learned the truth about Maya Carter's 12 years of training, he would realize the biggest mistake he made was not cornering her. It was believing she had ever been trapped. The truth was finally standing in front of them. And none of them were ready for it. Jake Reynolds had spent the entire night believing he understood Maya Carter. He thought he knew her because of what he saw. A black woman walking alone. A quiet person who didn't raise her voice. Someone who appeared to have no protection. No backup. No power. But that was the mistake people made when they judged someone by a single moment. They saw the surface. They never asked about the story underneath. Marcus, the security guard, stood a few feet away, looking at Jake and the others with a seriousness that changed the entire atmosphere. "You really don't know who you're dealing with," he repeated. Jake forced a laugh. "Come on. She's just some woman." The words were simple. But they carried the same belief that started everything. The belief that Maya was ordinary. The belief that she was someone they could dismiss. Marcus looked at him. "No," his voice became firm. "She's someone who spent years doing what most people couldn't." Ryan tightened his grip on his phone. "What does that mean?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked at Maya. And for a moment, the garage became quiet. Because Maya Carter was not the kind of person who talked about herself. She never walked into a room announcing what she had accomplished. She never needed strangers to know what she had survived. But tonight, the truth was no longer something she could keep hidden. Not because she wanted recognition. Because these men needed to understand the person they had chosen to underestimate. Marcus finally spoke. "Maya Carter trained with elite military units for 12 years. The words hit differently. Not because they were loud. Because they explained everything. The calm. The awareness. The control. The way she watched every movement before making one of her own." Jake stared at Maya. For the first time, his confidence completely disappeared. "Wait," he looked at Marcus. "Are you saying she's—" Marcus nodded. "She's not someone you scare." Tyler stepped back slightly. The same man who had been laughing minutes earlier suddenly looked uncomfortable. Because the story he believed he was creating had completely changed. He thought he was filming a victim. But he had recorded a warning. He thought he was surrounding someone powerless. But he had surrounded someone who understood pressure better than anyone in that garage. Maya watched their reactions without satisfaction. That was the part they struggled to understand. She wasn't enjoying their fear. She wasn't looking for revenge. She wasn't trying to prove she was better. She simply wanted them to understand a lesson that many people learn too late. Respect should come before consequences. Not after. Jake looked at her. So you were just pretending? Maya shook her head. No, her answer surprised him. I wasn't pretending. She stepped forward slightly. I was giving you a chance. Those words were heavier than any threat. Because they revealed the truth. Maya had never been powerless. She had been patient. There was a difference. A person without ability often stays quiet because they have no choice. A person with ability stays quiet because they do. And that was what made Maya different. Her strength was not something she discovered tonight. It was something she had carried for years. Years of discipline. Years of sacrifice. Years of walking into difficult situations and choosing control over fear. Ryan looked down at his phone screen. The video was still recording. And suddenly, he realized something. The internet would not see what he expected. They would not see a woman being humiliated. They would see 3 men revealing exactly who they were. Jake noticed Ryan's hesitation. Delete it. Ryan looked at him. What? Delete the video. But it was already too late. Because evidence doesn't disappear just because someone regrets creating it. Maya looked toward the security cameras above them. Then back at Jake. You should have thought about that before you started recording. Jake became silent. Because every move, every word, every threat had been captured. The same technology he used to embarrass her had become the thing that exposed him. And that was the final lesson they had not expected. Power does not always look powerful. Sometimes it walks quietly. Sometimes it speaks softly. Sometimes it stands alone in a dark garage while everyone around it thinks they have the advantage. But real strength is not measured by how many people you can intimidate. It is measured by how calm you can remain when everyone else loses control. And standing there beneath those cold garage lights, Jake Reynolds finally understood the truth. He never cornered Maya Carter. He only placed himself in front of someone who knew exactly how to escape. The garage was quiet now. Not because the danger had disappeared. But because the truth had finally arrived. A few minutes earlier, Jake Reynolds had been the loudest person in the room. His voice filled the concrete walls. His confidence controlled the atmosphere. He believed he had the advantage because 3 men stood against 1 woman. But now, standing beneath the cold fluorescent lights, Jake looked different. The confidence was gone. The arrogance had faded. Because for the first time, he understood the person standing in front of him. Maya Carter was not someone who survived because she was lucky. She survived because she was prepared. And that realization changed everything. Marcus, the security guard, stood beside the entrance, watching the 3 men carefully. You should leave before this gets worse, he said. Jake looked at him. You're threatening me now? Marcus shook his head. No, his voice remained calm. I'm telling you that you already crossed a line. Those words carried weight. Because this was no longer about a misunderstanding. No longer about a bad joke. No longer about 3 men making a careless decision. They had recorded themselves. They had surrounded her. They had ignored every warning. And now, they had to face what they had done. Ryan Mitchell looked down at his phone. The screen showed everything. Every insult. Every threat. Every moment where Maya had given them a chance to stop. The video that was supposed to embarrass her had become the strongest evidence against them. Ryan swallowed. What happens now? Maya looked at him. Her expression was calm. The truth happens now. She didn't say it with anger. She didn't say it with satisfaction. She said it like someone who had seen too many situations where people believed they could escape accountability. Jake stepped forward. You think you're better than us because you had some training? Maya looked at him. No, a pause. I think people should be responsible for their choices. The answer caught him off guard. Because he expected revenge. He expected rage. He expected her to use her ability to humiliate them the same way they tried to humiliate her. But Maya refused. That was the difference between power and cruelty. Cruel people use strength to make others feel small. Strong people use strength to prevent more damage. The distant sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the garage. Someone had called for help. And this time, nobody was coming to rescue Maya. Because Maya didn't need rescuing. The people who needed help were the ones who had underestimated her. A few minutes later, authorities arrived. Questions began. Names were taken. The situation that started as an attempt to intimidate one woman became a case built around the actions of 3 men. Jake tried to explain. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But that was the problem. People often say that after the consequences arrive, they regret the outcome. But they forget the choices that created it. Maya stood nearby, listening quietly. She didn't interrupt. She didn't exaggerate. She simply told the truth. Because she had learned long ago that facts were more powerful than anger. The video was reviewed. The security footage was checked. The timeline became clear. There was no confusion. No misunderstanding. No excuse. Just a series of decisions made by people who believed Maya would never be able to challenge them. And that belief was the reason they failed. Later that night, Maya walked out of the garage alone. The same way she had entered. The same calm expression. The same steady steps. But the difference was that now everyone knew what she carried inside. Not just training. Not just skill. Character. Because the greatest test of strength is not what someone does when they have power. It is what they choose to do when they have every reason to use it. Maya could have destroyed them. She could have made them feel the same fear they tried to create. Instead, she let the truth speak. And sometimes, the quietest response is the one people remember the longest. As Maya disappeared into the night, Jake Reynolds finally understood the lesson he should have learned before any of this began. He didn't lose because Maya was stronger. He lost because he believed she was weak. And that was a mistake he would never forget. The story of Maya Carter was never about a fight. It was never about proving that she was stronger than 3 men standing in a dark garage. It was never about showing the world that she could win. Because Maya had already won long before that night. She won every time she refused to let someone else decide her worth. She won every time she walked into a room where people doubted her and chose to remain focused. She won every time she remembered that strength was not measured by how much damage someone could cause. It was measured by how much control they could keep. Days after the incident, the video from the garage spread across the internet. Millions of people watched the same moments unfold. 3 men surrounding a woman they thought they could intimidate. A phone camera recording what they believed would become a humiliation. But instead, the world saw something completely different. They saw Maya Carter standing calmly while everyone else lost control. They saw a woman who refused to become what others expected her to be. They saw the difference between someone pretending to have power and someone who truly understood it. Comments flooded the video. Some people were shocked. Some were angry. Some admitted they had made the same mistake Jake and his friends made. Judging someone before knowing their story. Because that was the lesson hidden beneath everything that happened. People often see a single moment and believe they understand an entire person. They see a quiet person and assume weakness. They see someone alone and assume helplessness. They see someone who doesn't respond immediately and assume they have nothing to say. But Maya Carter proved something that night. Silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is discipline. Sometimes silence is the result of years spent learning how to remain calm when others want you to lose control. For Maya, the garage was not the first difficult place she had entered. And it would not be the last. Her journey had been built through challenges most people would never see. Through long days. Through impossible expectations. Through moments when she had to prove herself not because she lacked ability, but because others refused to recognize it. She understood what it felt like to be underestimated. To have people make assumptions before hearing her voice. To have strangers decide who she was before knowing what she had accomplished. But Maya never allowed those judgments to define her. She knew who she was. And that was enough. A few weeks later, Maya returned to the same building where everything happened. The garage was quiet. The same concrete walls. The same cold lights. The same place where three men thought they had control. She stood there for a moment, remembering that night. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. With understanding. Because every difficult moment teaches something. Every challenge reveals something. And Maya had learned that people will always underestimate what they cannot see. They could not see the years of preparation. They could not see the discipline. They could not see the battles she had already survived. All they saw was a woman standing alone. And they were wrong. Maya walked toward the exit. Calm. Steady. Unshaken. Because the greatest victory was not that. She defeated three men in a garage. The greatest victory was that she never allowed their perception of her to become her reality. She never needed to announce her strength. She never needed to demand respect. She simply carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was. And that was the final lesson Jake Reynolds and the others would remember. You cannot measure a person by what you see in front of you. You cannot know someone's strength by their appearance. You cannot mistake kindness for weakness. Because sometimes the person standing quietly in front of you has already survived battles you cannot imagine. And sometimes, the person you think is trapped, is the only person in the room who was never afraid.